YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. I want to talk to you about New England dieback. It was a disease that hit the eucalyptus trees around here on the New England tablelands back in the 1960s and 70s. Essentially, all the eucalyptus trees started to die. And there had been a bit of a mining boom going on up here, and for a while people thought that the dieback was being caused by a fungus or a virus in the soil introduced by mining equipment trucked in from Western Australia to take advantage of the boom. However, that turned out not to be the case. It turned out that during the 40s and 50s and early 60s, the DDT used as an insecticide had got into the food chain of the birds, and the DDT had caused their eggshells to become really thin. So the birds had squashed their own eggshells, and the birds which prey on leaf-eating insects had a population crash, and that meant that the leaf-eating insects had gone wild. Thus and because the trees lost all their solar panels and they were dying. So instead of seeing perfect unmarked eucalyptus leaves, the trees were having to try and conduct operations with this sort of thing going on. Right? And it's the youngest, tenderest shoots that get hit first. Alright? So when the trees find that all their solar panels out on the ends of the branches are being wiped out, which is pretty much what they were finding, they invoke what's known as radial regrowth, which is otherwise their response to bushfires. So when they can't get a decent crop of leaves out on the end, they suddenly become all bushy and they start pumping out leaves all the way along the branches. Right? And up around here, it's the yellow box trees that are suffering the worst depredations of the leaf-eating insects. And it's a bit of a worry because we all thought that New England dieback had gone away after the drought in the 1970s pretty much killed off the beetles. And the birds and the beetles kind of came back in a bit of a balance again. But if we move away from these mature box trees, which are having a hard time to survive, and we have a look at the daughter trees, a lot of them are starting to die. And you know, this is in the middle of a stringy bark box wattle regrowth forest. The box trees up in here are suffering. The daughter trees, well, I have my doubts as to how many of them are going to survive at all. And it takes the trees a couple of years to die. But the trend is pretty clear. The box trees go first. They're the slowest growing of the trees around here. And if the box trees go and then the stringy barks go, I'm even starting to have trouble this year with the wattle trees. So, considering that I'm up here on a regrowth forest where there's sufficient tree cover for the birds to have the best possible chance of surviving in numbers sufficient to keep the canopy clear, and something else is going on. And of course the prime candidate, when something else is going on and you don't know what it is that's stuffing the biosphere, the prime candidate is usually global warming. So this year, yeah, we've had a really warm winter, the warmest winter on record ever since Whitefella started keeping records in Australia. And we had a heat wave in October and then a bit of a cold snap. So a lot of the birds have tried to breed in the heat wave, and then the cold snap has either killed the parents or killed the nestlings, the hatchlings. But either which way, the Christmas beetles have gone off. and they really are hammering the young box trees. And like I said, that's up here. That's on the endangered species sanctuary that the box trees are losing their leaves. Right? Now back in the 1970s, when they worked out what was going on, somebody came up with a poison which could be injected into holes drilled in the tree's trunk, and the poison moved up through the xylem or phloem cells, whichever ones it is, that carry moisture up from the roots to the leaves, and as the wicked evil leaf eaters munched on the edges of the leaves, they died. And I've seen sick trees in the 70s with carpets of dead Christmas beetles under them after they've been treated. So I'm personally going to go and start harassing the Parks and Wildlife or the Forestry or somebody like that to find out if there's anything that they can point me at or provide me with. But if nothing is done, then it'll be Celtic country where the gum trees are dead. And this year even the wattle trees are having a hard time. With these little bugs. That one's not a Christmas beetle, but there it is, munching away. Chewing furiously. And you know, there's other things like these galls, which are a formation of cellulose and lignin made by a sap-sucking grub from a wasp. And the biological control for the galls on the wattle trees, would you believe, is crimson rosellas. So as well as this little leaf-eating insect or bug, this tree's fighting off a mild infestation of gall wasps, and apparently the crimson rosellas haven't discovered this tree yet because it's still got some galls on it. Yet if we look at the ground under it, it hasn't got any opened galls. Whereas if we have a look underneath this wattle tree, the one that's over the top of the drinking water bowls, this tree was covered in galls only about a week ago. But if you have a look on the ground underneath the tree, if you look here and go straight up, I'm not underneath the tree. If I move 1.5 paces forward and I come down onto the ground, what do we find here? We find half a gall. Right? We come up a bit, we find some open wattle seed cases. We have another opened gall minus its grub. Another open gall minus its grub. Another open gall minus its grub. A gall probably got a grub in there because it's been knocked off and left off. No, can't find it. Another gall, more galls, more bits of galls. The ground is carpeted with the detritus of the gall wasp balls, which the crimson rosellas have been defending the tree against. Right? This is not anything that I'm making up. Those rosellas have just about completely cleaned that tree. Oh, there's one gall that I can see still up there. But it's as if they've left just enough on the tree to ensure that they'll get a few wasps surviving. As far as the birds are concerned, the food supply is not going to be exhausted. But anyway, we are having a resurgence of New England dieback. It's hitting the wattle trees, it's hitting the box trees, and out here in the thickly treed parts of the canopy, the stringy barks are pretty much okay, but there's quite a lot of box trees that are dying. And this tree has been dead, 4 or 5 times before, so I don't know whether it's going to come back. But if you look at the trunk, has come up, and the original core of the sapling was there. Right? And this, and this, and this, and that are coppices, and this here is a recovery. Right? That died, and this grew off it. So I don't know whether this tree is going to recover again, but as a rule of thumb, the bigger the tree is, the better its chance of having the resources necessary to protect itself by just pumping out leaves faster than the Christmas beetle can chew the leaves up and kill the tree. But, then of course, something else entirely is going on here. I'm not sure whether that's a fungus or a virus or what it is, but the leaves have been munched on, and then something else is going in and killing the leaf from the outside. So perhaps we've got a strain of the bugs that have got a mouth infection, perhaps. Right, it's not entirely encouraging when you see the multiple attacks that are going onto the trees. Anyway, this can be movie part 1, and I'll also go for a bit of a drive into town with the camera in the car, and I'll show you how the further towards town you get, the worse it gets. Once you go south of Glen Innes, you start getting into the same sort of problem. East of Glen Innes, there's probably a 15-kilometre band of it. So, cross between the drought, global warming. Maybe there's some chemical pollution aspects. Don't know what the farmers are using on their crops as pesticides. I don't know what the residues are or how far the overspray is, or whether it's just breeding failure because of the heat wave followed by a cold snap. But the trees are in trouble. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.